the Legacy of Kain series. Early 2000s, this was the time of the PlayStation 1 and the PlayStation 2 and the very first version of the Xbox. What a fucking amazing game series this was. It was originally just Blood Omen, that was it. But then, Crystal Dynamics ended up buying the whole rights to it. And then we got the sequel, Soul Reaver. Then we got Soul Reaver 2. And then at the end of that, Blood Omen 2 happened as a result because of timeline shit. And then we got Defiance. I'm not going to lie, this whole series is really fucking iconic to my childhood. Especially Soul Reaver, because that was what introduced me to it all. And that's still, what I played a lot as a kid on the PlayStation. Everything about the whole series is polished. Voice acting is amazing for an early 2000s game. The gameplay is really good, and the storytelling is just top fucking notch. Even the intro cinematic that plays when you first start the Soul Reaver is so fucking iconic. It still gives me chills down my spine today. It's really well done, and with Ozar Midrashim by Information Society playing in the background, it's just freaking polished. So before we actually get on to discussing the Neca figure itself, I want you to see this cinematic. You just need to see it. It will give you a lot of context as well to the review, as to how Raziel looks the way he does. But let me tell you, this cinematic is freaking awesome. It is so well done, and this is from 1999, by the way.
Kain is deified. The clans tell tales of him. Few know the truth. He was mortal once, as were we all. However, his contempt for humanity drove him to create me and my brethren. I am Raziel, firstborn of his lieutenants. I stood with Kain and my brethren at the dawn of the Empire. I have served him a millennium. Over time, we became less human and more divine. Kain would enter the state of change and emerge with a new gift. Some years after the Master, our evolution would follow, until I had the honor of surpassing my lord. For my transgression, I earned a new kind of reward. Agony. There was only one possible outcome. My eternal damnation. I, Raziel, was to suffer the fate of traitors and weaklings, to burn forever in the bowels of the lake of the dead. Cast him in. Tumbling, burning with white-hot fire, I plunged into the depths of the abyss. Unspeakable pain, relentless agony. Time ceased to exist. Only this torture and a deepening hatred of the hypocrisy that damned me to this hell. An eternity passed, and my torment receded, bringing me back from the precipice of madness. The descent had destroyed me, and yet I lived.
Now, you cannot just sit there and tell me that that was not fucking cool, because let me tell you, that was freaking amazing. Like, just that one cinematic alone explains so much story and so much context. It is incredible. That's how good this series is. But I think I've rambled on enough about it now. Let's get to what you guys are really here for, which is the figure itself, starting with the accessories. So, with the accessories, this is where things get a bit odd in a good way. So, Raziel is released in 2007. He's a much older Neca figure. And he comes with a total of 8 accessories. That's right, 8 different things. Which is freaking amazing, because Isaac Clarke was released 2 years later in 2009 and only has 1 accessory per variant. The bloody variant here comes with the Ripper. The other variants come with a plasma cutter each. Whereas Raziel here came with 8. So I don't know what was going on there, but I am glad that we got the amount of accessories we did for Raziel, because I don't think he would have been quite as good if he didn't come with these. So we'll start off with probably what is the most significant part of him, which is his shroud. As you saw in the opening cinematic that I showed, when he was thrown into the Lake of the Dead, this thing kind of just draped on his shoulder. When he got up, he then swung it around him, and in some magical reason, it's joined together at the back, and it's like that in the game. This is a very, very good sculpt. The paint is not 100% clean. You can see that it's way off the line. So after this review, I'm going to be touching up the paint just to make it neater and be in the lines, because that does bug me quite a bit. But nonetheless, it is very nice. The texture is done really, really well. You know, lots of little lumps and stuff in it, even some on the underside. And it is also quite a soft vinyl, so it doesn't hinder the articulation too much. Which is good, but it does a little on the shoulders, but we'll get to that later. Either way, that is the shroud. The next we have is a very common item in Soul Reaver that you can pick up off the walls, which is the torch. And this is obviously a weapon that Raziel can use against the vampires. Not the actual leaders themselves, but like the fledglings and the adult ones, the clan ones. He can use these so he can like attack them enough times, stun them, and then ignite them with it, which is pretty cool. And it's got a very nice wood grain effect on it, right down to the peg, even looking like a piece of stump, which is really clever. And there's a reason for this peg, which keys into other accessories we'll get into. It does look good. Nice washes in there, nice paint, nice sculpt work, and it does actually look like a real piece of wood. And then the flame as well is in a transparent, translucent orange, which is pretty cool. And you can even see the actual wood, the opaque brown plastic in there as well, which is neat. I do dig that, as it does actually look kind of realistic, as much as you could with a plastic accessory like this. Now, next we get are a pair of open hands, which is pretty cool. Now, you can see that the fingers are kind of widened out a little, kind of spread out, so these are more like the dynamic open hands that you would get with the Ultimate Predators, for example. And these have a very nice sculpt. You can see all the lines in the bone and then the kind of cloth wrappings around them. Again, the paint doesn't quite go up to the edges, so that is something I'm going to have to touch up. And it is like on both of them. They have got a wash in there, which is nice. So you can see all the little nooks and crannies brought out with a dark wash, which does look pretty good. And overall, these are pretty good. I do like them. And this one is quite important for the last accessory, which we'll get into. The next we get as well is another pair of hands, which are the ones with the peg holes, as you can see. And these are quite interesting ones. I do really like these. Again, same type of paint. Obviously, this time the thumbs are the only things where the paint is not quite meeting the lines. The fingers are very, very different because these have a hinge in them, so they're articulated, which is pretty nice. I do like that a lot. And they're pretty much the same, except the fingers are straight this time because of the hinge. But same sculpts and whatnot, you know, they look the same as the open, more dynamic ones, which is pretty good. And again, these look great, and I'm really glad we got these, because Neca could have just given us, you know, one or neither. But I'm glad that they did. I'm glad they gave us a pair of them. It's really, really nice. And the next is this coil, this spectral coil. This is pretty good. Now, mine does look a tiny bit green, probably because it's slightly yellowed from sunlight. I'm not sure. I did buy this secondhand. But it's nothing a bit of de-yellowing can't fix, if that's the case. But it does look really good. Nice swirly spectral details are on it. and a little bit right there as well. It does look really good, though I will say trying to get this on the figure's arm is a pain in the ass because it does want to kind of dislodge itself and fall off. Now this actually keys into the next accessory, the final one, which is arguably the most important one of all, which is the actual Soul Reaver Wraithblade itself. And this is absolutely amazing. I will say as well, even though this figure was released as Soul Reaver, the sculpt and the details, especially with this, are more from Legacy of Kain Defiance, because in Soul Reaver, the first game, it was very, there was just a polygonal model with pixelated textures, because it was, the game was 1999, for crying out loud. Graphics engines weren't what they weren't back then what they are now. You could still see the swirl on the old model, which was cool, and that is represented here. And there's a lot of nice detail all throughout. It really does look like a spectral blade, which it is. This is the Soul Reaver in its its true Wraithblade form. And as I was saying about Legacy of Kain Defiance, one of the things that you notice in that when Raziel has this on is that, has it out, I should say, is that these bits right here, which replicate the actual full-on sword, the physical metal sword, these kind of replicate that. And that kind of looks a bit like the skull that the actual sword had. And obviously that was something that I noticed when watching gameplay for Defiance, is that these were very prominent on that render, which is pretty nice. And you can see it's got a nice thick bit right there, which is pretty cool. And it does look good. Again, I think mine might be slightly yellowed. So it's coming off more greenish than bluish, but it's nothing a bit of de-yellowing won't fix. It does look really, really nice though. And again, there's no paint in this, it's just translucent blue, which is pretty good. And now we'll get on to how to, actually install accessories on the figure. So Raziel is like this when he has no accessories. I will say, if you do buy one mint on card, the shroud is already on him, but you can use this information of installing it to also remove it. The head, you do have to pull off the head. It is just on a ball peg. As you can see, you've got the hole in there, the ball, the peg sticking out. So what you then do is you just take the shroud, you slip it on, and then you take the head and you just line it up and snap it back in. Obviously, if this was the spectral plain version with the more stretched out shroud, you could just pop this off easy. You wouldn't have to pop the head off, you just slide it off. Now, the hands are on ball pegs, which is great. So you can take any hand that you want. I'm going to take this one right here, this one with the fingers. I'm going to pop that in like so, just pop in quite nicely. Obviously, if you do get this mint, the sockets are going to be quite tight at first. So again, higher dry, hot water will help a lot. And even though this is an older figure, it will not damage the plastic. I've done it many times, it does work. So again, the socket, the ball peg, it does pop on. Now for the actual Wraithblade itself, the coil, again, separate piece. You could just have this on his own and then have him holding the torch, as if you have the Wraithblade in the game and then you pick up a torch, the blade retracts, but the coil stays. And again, yeah, you can sort of see some of the issues. Now, the actual installation of the blade is quite neat. You can see you've got some holes in there. You could put it either way. There's no specific way, but it does fit better one way than the other, which is this way. You just kind of ram that bugger right in there. And that is the, you can see the problems with the coil there. That is the Wraithblade on him. Now, obviously, like I said previously with the accessories, this is based on, design-wise on Defiance, whereas, this is a Soul Reaver figure. In Soul Reaver and Soul Reaver 2, he had it coming straight out of his arm like this. But in Defiance, it actually was more like a handle, and he was holding it like that, which was an interesting design change from, from Defiance. Because in Soul Reaver 1 and 2, of course, he always had it coming out of his hand like that. So I do find that pretty interesting. With that out of the way, let's get on to the details, shall we? Now, when it comes to the details, just like the Wraithblade itself, the sculpt is based more on Defiance, because Defiance is the last game in the series, and as such, it does have the most high-definition graphics for the time. I think it might have been 2004, maybe 2005. I don't know. I've not actually played Defiance. I'm watching gameplay on YouTube. So to kind of get more information, really, even though I know the story. But I will say the sculpt on this is absolutely friggin' brilliant. It is really, really nice. Now, I will remove the shroud just so we can actually take a look at the details that are underneath it, because It wouldn't be a proper Neca figure if details weren't all over the place. And this is obviously the prominent reason for him wearing the shroud. Sorry, the main reason. As you can see, he's got no lower jaw. As you saw in the opening cinematic, he got thrown into water, which acts like acid to these guys, and it completely destroyed him. That being said, the teeth are not well painted on mine. Again, something I'm going to have to touch up. But they are sculpted very nicely. In fact, the whole thing is sculpted really well. The hair looks fantastic. It does have a very dark grey dry brush in there, which I don't think that's shown up too well on camera, but it is something that I've actually just noticed right now in person, which is pretty neat. And it does look good. It does look really nice. The muscle fibres and textures all look really nice. You've got the kind of collarbones here, the thorax, the larynx. Sorry, that's the word I meant to use. Why did I say thorax? Whatever. You have the larynx here as well. And if I remove the head, there is actually a little bit of detail underneath, which is nice. You can kind of see some wrinkly bits there, like the underside of his mouth, and it does look good. And the head has an amazing look to, you know, really nice texture. The skin, it does look really spectral, and again, he looks like a wraith, which is what he is, because he's made out of a vampire corpse. The arms are done well. This is obviously an older one where the pegs were still in, which I actually prefer in some ways, because if there's a joint stuck, you can just pull the pin out and disassemble it without breaking anything. The arms are done really nicely as well. Again, the muscular fibre, it looks good. He's a little skinny though, but you know, he was wrecked from when he got thrown into the water. You got the white and black lining in there, which is pretty nice. Obviously some kind of like tendons, I think. You got the kind of wrapping here around his arms, and then you got this more cloth-like wrapping here. We've already talked about the hands. The chest is pretty nicely done. You know, you've got the kind of sternum area here. You've got some of the lower ribs. And if you come around to the back with the wings, you can see there's actually some black paint in there, some black lining, which is pretty nice and does look pretty decent. And again, you've got kind of the lateral muscles here. I think these are trapezoids. I'm really not sure. I'm no biologist. The wings look really good, and this is something I do quite like. They have an airbrushed look to them, where the purple is kind of grading in and fading, which is pretty nice. And despite these being really thin, they are made of a soft vinyl, so they are not going to break. A very clever move on Neca's part. But I will say, if you do buy one of these mints, the wings are put on the opposite way round. So this wing is on this ball socket, and this wing is on this socket. I guess that's just for storing it in the packaging. And when I did get this, the wings were still on the wrong way round. So I heated up the torso, popped the wings off, put them in the right way, and it's not a problem. And they do have the sculpts going on the other side as well, the paint, and it does look really good. It does look stunning. Really nice, ripped up from where Kain tore the bones out. And I'm surprised of all of the skin that survived on him, these were, because these are obviously quite thin skin and membranes, and if the water burns like acid, these should be non-existent. But, I mean, it's a fantasy universe, so whatever. Now, if we come down to the lower abdominal region, the spine, you can sort of see a hint of white in there, which is actual spine itself. More muscle fibres going all the way up into his back. These kind of hip bones right here. Of course, you got his backside right there, which obviously wouldn't have done anything because he doesn't use a toilet as a vampire. And then we come round to his abdominal section, which I think this might have been the inside of the spinal region. I don't know. It kind of looks like he's got two spinal cords there, which is very strange. Got a white line going up on each, and there's even detail in there as well. But I'm not really quite... you can sort of see it. It is sculpted in there, and the camera's out of focus. So it is in there, and that's actually pretty cool when it comes to the articulation. You can see the hip pelvis right here as well, which looks pretty nice. Some white accents on it as well, which look pretty good. They're not quite meeting the lines here, so again, more touch-ups. And then we come to the actual hips themselves, and as you can see, you know, you've got the hip bone here, continuing, well, the leg bone, sorry, continuing all the way down the leg. The knee bones here as well, some more tendons and whatnot painted and sculpted in. It does look good. They've not missed anything, right down to the little black in the backs and knees and this kind of off bluish, kind of greyish, off-white almost. It does look really good, and it is the same for the other leg. If I rotate the leg, you can see it continues down the thigh, and we do have the black lines in there as well, so really, really nicely done. They can come to the kind of boots area. You see again more of that kind of cloth-like detail, though I suspect these were probably made out of metal or something, or a really thick leather, because they do kind of have that look to them. being actual hammered metal. I don't know, it's never explained in the game. And then we come to his feet, which do have a little bit of, I guess, strapping going around. Obviously, they've not fully sculpted their foot in at the base, which is a bit dumb. I don't know why they did that back then. Whatever. And then we get, of course, the toes, which are pretty cool. And again, these aren't fully painted. There's still a bit of... The paint's a little bit untidy on there, so I'll have to touch it up. But what is interesting is that the toes are actually painted bone at the end, because in the games, they are blue like the rest of him. They're not actually painted, which is interesting. But I don't mind. I like them like this. They look pretty decent, being painted. And they've got a nice wash in them as well. And again, the rest of the foot also has texturing and black lining you can see in there, and it does look really, really nice. It is a stunning figure. It is a really good looking figure, to be quite frank. Probably one of the best that I've ever seen. Although now I mention it, why is this left kind of bare? That is a bit odd. Whatever, it's just a quirk. But it, like I said, it does look really, really damn good. And I do hope at some point the whole Legacy of Kain series gets popular again, maybe gets a remaster or something, or even a remake, and this ends up being released again, because this figure's quite hard to find. Still, it is amazing. For an older figure, it is absolutely amazing. And I'm not going to mention the Spectral Plane version, because I would have to get that to actually review it. This is about this figure, which is the Material Plane version. And this is good. Apart from the fact the paint's a bit lacking in some areas and needs touching up to be neater and on the actual lines, it is really good. And again, the sculpt work is top notch. So I am very, very impressed. So for Raziel's articulation, I have installed the shroud back on for now, just so you can see what it is like, what the articulation is like in the arms and the head and the wings with the shroud on. I will remove it afterwards to show what it's like so you can actually see the full range of motion. But this is a full coverage, so that's why I'm doing it. Full coverage on the articulation so you can see how it affects it if you ever do decide to hunt this figure down. So the head is on the ball peg, as you saw. It can look up, not too bad. Look down a bit, a decent amount, but then he ends up burying his face in his shroud, which is a little amusing. And he can, tilt his head side to side, which he does sometimes do in the games. You can also rotate it all the way around. And as you see, the shroud doesn't actually affect the head. The arms are on pin socket joints with a disc hinge, so they should rotate all the way around, but as you can see, the shroud does restrict it when it starts getting higher up. Same if you move the arm back. It does hinder it. You do get the disc hinge enabling out to the side movement, which again, it's only going up that far, and you can see the shroud starting to bump up against it. The biceps have a rotation, which is pretty good, bicep swivel. The elbows do bend, they straighten out all the way, and then you can bend just shy of 90, I'd say maybe 85 degrees, which is not bad. The wrists, it doesn't matter which hand you have in, the movement's the same because it's more affected by the actual forearm here. The ball pegs, you can get the wrist going down like that, going up that much. You can rotate it, and of course you can pivot it. And again, the fingers on the articulated ones, they do bend all the way. And if we just get the torch in so you can see how it works, it's the same on both hands. So, and the way it kind of points forward, you can see how it's going at a slight angle. That actually looks pretty good as well. So, good way, good that turned out the way it did. The other hand, again, I'll show the same because it's a completely different sculpt on this forearm, and it does affect it very differently to the point where the movement is actually a lot less. And even though I'm using the open hand, if I had this hand on, it would be the exact same. So you can sort of see the up and down movement is pretty much non-existent. The pivot's only there, and if I rotate it, it ends up going off at a weird angle, which is strange. Now, the wings are on ball pegs. You can sort of see they're at an angle as well. They're kind of curved pegs, which is pretty interesting, so that the wings look natural. And if you have them out like this, it's pretty good. Obviously, if you want to move them any higher, you have to kind of, get them like that, which then they stick out at a right angle, and it does look strange. Obviously, though, we can't really do this because the bones are gone, so, most of the time they're just going to be draped like that. But obviously, if you want to pose them, you can, and they can open out all the way, which is really, really nice. I do like that the little cut in the socket is there so that this can actually fit like so. It is pretty dang nice. Now I will get the shroud off and then show you the head and the shoulders and the wings again, just so you can see what it's like. And the head has pretty much the same range of motion. Same, you know, exactly the same. The shoulders, however, obviously can rotate all the way around this time. And the out to the side movement's pretty much not affected because they only go out that far anyway. It is exactly the same on the other arm. The out to side movement is pretty much only that. Which is not bad, of course. The wings, now that the shroud is out of the way, can be placed all the way up. And, you know, you could have them like that if you wanted. Obviously, I wouldn't. But, you know, they can do that if you so wish, which is pretty neat. And that actually helps to shun off the rest of the articulation as well. So the diaphragm is really cool because, as you saw, there is that sculpted bit in there. So that is actually a socket, and then there's a straight peg coming out the torso with a ball on it. That's how I think this is. I'm not actually sure. But it does enable him to crunch forward a decent amount, which is pretty good. Obviously, he doesn't have any internal organs here, so they're not affecting the movements. Arching back is kind of non-existent. Leaning side to side can be done, but it's pretty much, you know, it's not really there. And of course, you can rotate. Now, the hips are on Y angles, which is a bit unusual, but for Raziel, they actually work. So right now, so you have a disc hinge, you have a peg going down into the upper leg, and you have a peg going straight up at a very steep angle into the actual pelvis area. Vector from Operation Raccoon City has a straight thing, a similar thing, but the pegs are going straight up into his pelvis rather than at an angle. So you have the disc hinge, and in this orientation, you can bring the legs out that much. Now, if I take this and I rotate it, and then, you know, get the leg straight, you can see that with the peg all being straight, the leg is at an angle, whereas, you know, the hinge here enables you to close the leg in. The hinge is now facing this way, so the leg is like that. And that's actually not too bad, but then the sculpt is broken up. Either way, with the hinge in this position, you do get the leg only going that forward. And that's because of the muscle sculpt here butting up against the pelvis here. So it's not really going any further than that. But that's fine. The fact that he has leg articulation is something. You know, I don't really see how else they could have done this. And it does go back as well, as you saw. Although if you want more out to the side movement, you rotate the actual joint all the way around, and you can get the leg, as you can see, with the actual pelvis sculpt in there. And I've just chipped some of the paint, I think. Oh dear. Either way, you can see that the leg now kicks higher out, which is, well, more out to the side, which is nice. And it is a little difficult to work with rotating all this. The knees are pretty cool. They bend a full 90. And I do like how the kneecap actually splits here. That is pretty cool. And it does bend the same on the other side. So, you know, you can get him some pretty decent poses. And I have actually once or twice managed to have him in a semi-running pose balanced on one foot, which is very hard to do usually with figures. But with this guy, I actually managed to achieve it. I'm not going to show it because it'll take me ages to get it sorted, and it will just drive me crazy. And that is actually because the way the feet are done. Just like Isaac Clarke that I reviewed last year, the feet are on a hinge with a peg going up. So they hinge up and down only that much. And even though they are in a straight peg, which can rotate, it's not really meant for rotation. And especially with this, as it's not going anywhere. It's a bit disappointing. I guess an ankle pivot would have been better, but this is an older figure. And as he has the Player Select logo on him, you know, he's got all this great articulation, whereas if he didn't have Player Select, he would have just been mostly action figure. Even though I say that, yet Kain also had the Player Select logo, and he was mostly a action figure. So the fact that Raziel actually has a load of articulation is really nice. And it is good. I think the articulation's great on this, and it still holds up well. Obviously, a more modern version would, for modern standards, require double elbows and double knees and maybe a slightly better hip joint. But this is acceptable for me. I can't really complain too much. Yeah, the hips can be a bit difficult with rotating them around, but it's not the end of the world. And with that in mind, size comparison time. All right, now it's size comparison time. I've got my other Player Select figures, so I will show him off with all of those. So here he is with my other Player Select figures. We have Altair from Assassin's Creed, Vector from Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City, Damon Bade from Gears of War Judgment, and Isaac Clarke from the original 2008 Dead Space. And this is actually a really good scale because I was I've literally set up my PlayStation 1 a couple of days ago, and I have been playing the original game, and I did make a conscious decision to go into the human citadel and stand next to a normal human, and this is actually accurate. I was expecting Raziel to be a bit taller than a human, but no, he is around the same height as a normal human. He's a little bit shorter than Isaac, but Isaac is like 6'2", so it makes sense that he's taller than everyone else. And in real life as well, the actor Gunnar Wright, who plays Isaac Clarke, is a freaking tall. Still, so this actually works really well as, you know, as a size, you know, as a scale. It works really, really nicely. He is the right size, which is good. I mean, he could be maybe a little taller because Vector's a little bit taller, but this works really nicely. I'm quite happy with the size of him as a 7, you know, compared to my other 7-inch figures. And this figure means fucking loads to me. I cannot explain in words just how much this figure means to me, because this character was a huge part of my childhood in gaming. He was almost 50% of my childhood. I'm not even joking. Even though I didn't get very far in the game when I was younger because I was awful at video games, I just loved just running around parts of Nosgoth and killing vampires as him, even though I never progressed until I read about how to progress in the game later on. This is the one Neca figure I think I have no complaints over. Loads of accessories, loads of friggin' articulation at the time, you know, especially as he's an older figure. And the accessories being the key thing as well, because, like, most figures only came with 1 or 2 things back then. This guy comes with fucking loads. The sculpt is freaking amazing. Obviously based more on Legacy Kain Defiance rather than the original Soul Reaver game, because the original Soul Reaver was a very basic polygonal model with pixelated textures. Even the sword, you know, the Soul Reaver Wraithblade, you know, has its, you know, details more from Defiance. But, you know, the way he holds it is akin to Soul Reaver 1. What can I say? This figure is freaking brilliant. He has got to be one of the finest of all the Neca figures that have ever existed. Now, as always, in the description, you'll find Wikipedia links. As always, I will post a few in there. You know, plenty of all that stuff. You guys know me for that one. I have posted this entire photo shoot on my Instagram, and because of the fact you can post music on Instagram, I've even posted the Ozar Midrashim piece in there. So when you see all these photos, you will literally see, you'll hear the Ozar Midrashim theme playing. And yeah, this is an unusual photo shoot. I literally loaded up my TV with the initial, you know, start menu for Soul Reaver, just to give a badass freaking background, and just specifically for this photo shoot.
One of us remains.
I had to. I didn't want to use the old white wall background. It just didn't feel it would suffice. But I am using it for this one, and these are my top 2 childhood heroes in gaming. Predator Concrete Jungle was another game that I really, really loved, and, you know, couldn't progress very far. And as soon as I learned how to progress further in it, I loved the game even more. It's funny, the 2 top game characters for me I have the same experience with them playing the games. I don't progress very far until much later on, but I'm still enjoying the process nonetheless. I can't tell how much this means to me, really, to get these guys. And, yeah, they are fucking amazing. Now, I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. You guys know the drill. Like button, subscribe, whatnot. And just remember, as long as a single one of us remains, we are Legion. Actually, last note, get a load of this. This was 2 years ago. Yep. I can't tell you how freaking stoked I was when I saw this. I was getting photos for this review and I found this, and I'm pretty freaking excited. And I'm really, really hoping that we get a return to this series. You need to check this series out if you haven't. It is well worth your time. And as a special treat, I'll show the intro cinematic for Soul Reaver 2, which funnily enough was literally a cinematic recreation of the ending of the first Soul Reaver game, so enjoy. And as always, I hope to see you guys in the next video.
At last. I must say I'm disappointed in your progress. I imagined you'd be here sooner. Tell me, did it trouble you to murder your brothers?
Did it trouble you when you ordered me into the abyss?
Eternity is relentless, Raziel. When I first stole into this chamber centuries ago, I did not fathom the true power of knowledge. To know the future, Raziel. To see its paths and streams tracing out into the infinite. As a man, I could never contain such forbidden truths. But each of us is so much more than we once were. Do you not feel with all your soul how we have become like gods? As such, are we not indivisible? As long as a single one of us stands, we are legion. Our futures are predestined. Mobius foretold mine eons ago. We each play out the parts fate has written for us. Free will is an illusion.
I found the tomb of Sarafan, Kain. How could you profane a priest by turning him into a vampire?
How could I not? One must keep his friends close, Raziel, and his enemies even closer. Who better to serve me than those whose passion transcends all notions of good and evil?
The Sarafan were saviors, defending Nazgûl from the corruption that we represent. My eyes are opened, Kain. I find no nobility in the unlife you rudely forced on my unwilling corpse.
You may have uncovered your past, but you know nothing of it. You think the Sarafan were noble, altruistic? Oh, don't be simple. Their agenda was the same as ours. You nearly had me, Raziel. But this is not where or how it ends. Fate promises more twists before this drama unfolds completely.
Raziel, Redeemer and Destroyer, Pawn and Messiah. Welcome, time-span soul. Welcome to your destiny.